Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to safetystudygroup.com, Safety Study Group YouTube channel, dunyadna.com, and Durus Dunyadna's YouTube channel. Today we'll be talking about unsafe conditions and unsafe acts and how to differentiate between this and this, and what does this category involve and what does the other one involve. Unsafe conditions involve material, equipment, and environment. Unsafe acts involve people. So, altogether, we have material, equipment, environment, and people. Material, equipment, environment, and people. A lot of people also involve systems, but we will not be talking about this one. To make it short, all these words, we can use the acronym MEEP. MEEP. MEEP stands for Material, Equipment, Environment, and People. And by the way, whenever you're doing any job analysis, any JSA or JHA or risk assessment, you should always include these four things in your assessment. Unsafe conditions. What does it involve? Unsafe conditions involve material, equipment, and environment. Let's talk about the material first. Material is anything you use for the job, but after the job is done, you leave that in place. An example on that would be making a manhole, and you will need cement, rebar, scaffold, wood, a lot of other things. Anything that stays in the concrete once you're done and you leave for another job, that is material. For example, you have cement, sand, rebar, water, any additives you may add to this cement. This is all called material. The wood, the scaffold, the hammers, the spare rebar, whatever, all of this thing that you're taking with you, this is equipment. The rebar is still material. The things you take with you is equipment. Equipment, let's take another example. If you're trying to level a street or a road or a bumpy road, you will use a bulldozer, you'll use a front-end loader, you'll use other equipment. Maybe you will also use a shovel and a pick. These things are all equipment. These things are equipment. When we talk about environment, environment is broken down into two sections: the environment of the work and the environment of the world. For example, the environment of the world involves how hot it is. It's going to be unsafe for people to work because it's too hot, or maybe there's too much snow. It's going to be too cold. It's going to be rainy. Again, this is the environment of the world. Foggy. If you talk about the environment of the workplace, you have too much noise. This is an unsafe condition. You have too much traffic. Unsafe condition. You have slippery surfaces. Unsafe conditions. We can give a lot of examples on each one, but let's not spend too much time talking about this, and let's actually talk about how we can differentiate between unsafe acts and unsafe conditions. All unsafe conditions are made by people. All unsafe conditions are made by people. Also, all unsafe acts are made by people. What? This is confusing. It's not confusing. If we talk about the unsafe acts alone, this involves any action being taken in front of you while you see the other person doing it. This is an unsafe act. For example, if you see somebody parking the car on a hill, if it's going downwards or upwards, if you see him park it on a hill without using the handbrakes, without using the let's say a stopper to put behind their car, this is an unsafe act. If you actually physically see somebody doing this in real time, this is an unsafe act. But if the person parked their car and left, and you come afterwards and you see a car parked, already it's parked, but you don't see anybody parking it right now. If you see the parked car and you know that this is parked incorrectly, this is an unsafe condition. Another example, if you see, for example, a water hose, okay, and the water is running and it's close to a source of electricity, this is an unsafe condition. But if you see the hose being placed there by somebody and that person go in and then open in the water, this is an unsafe act. So in short, all of unsafe conditions, they involve material, equipment, and environment. Unsafe acts involve people. I will give you an example that I was talking to one of my friends about yesterday, and it's actually very realistic. You have a confined space. The confined space, of course, before you enter, you need to have a lot of things in place. For example, you need to have the permit, rescue plan, JSA, JHA, or risk assessment. You need to have a rescue plan. Maybe I said it, maybe I didn't. You need to have a rescue tripod, test the internal atmosphere. Maybe you need mechanical ventilation. You have to bring the mechanical ventilation. You need a rescue team. You need SCBA or SABA, depending on the confined space that you're going into. All these things must be in place before you go into the confined space. All of these things. However, if you choose, or if the worker or workers decide to go into the confined space without following all these things, without having them in place, this is not only an unsafe act, it's also a near miss and the non-compliance report waiting to happen. An NCR is very bad for any company. We don't want to talk about that, but it's real. If somebody is not following the rules and procedures in doing their jobs safely, they deserve an NCR. But again, this is for another time and another place. The confined space itself is a dangerous place to enter. In and itself, it's always in a bad condition. It's always in an unsafe condition. Always. Why? You don't know what's in there. Maybe there's water. Maybe there is an agitator in there. It's going to cut you down to pieces. Maybe there is a dangerous atmosphere, like explosive atmosphere. Maybe there is not enough oxygen for you. So you have to check all these things, and you have to have a lockout system in place. You need to follow the lockout and tag out procedure. Make sure that you've isolated all the energy sources before you enter. If you do that, this is a safe act. If you don't do that, this is an unsafe act. Okay? Now, if you see something being used, an equipment, for example, a table saw. If somebody's cutting wood and you decide to put your hand in front of the blade, what is it going to do? It's going to cut your hand. But, before it cuts it, if you try to put your hand under the table saw, this is an unsafe act. But most table saws, they don't have enough room for you to put your hands under. Why? Because there would be a guard in place to prevent your hand from going there, even by mistake. But if the equipment doesn't have a guard in place, this is an unsafe condition. This is an unsafe condition. If the grinding machine doesn't have a guard on it, this is an unsafe condition. If the welder or the blacksmith is using a grinding machine and the sparks are going all around and he's working by himself, this is an unsafe act and unsafe condition, because you need to have unsafe condition because maybe the sparks will be going to something and cause a fire. It's an unsafe act because he's doing it on purpose. He knows that it's wrong, or she knows it's wrong, and they're doing it. And unsafe condition because you don't know what's going to happen. If somebody walks by and there are no signs or anything outside, nobody knows what's going on inside. If they go inside and they hold something flammable in their hands, for example, a can of paint, okay, you will have a fire in a second, just like that. So this is an unsafe act and an unsafe condition. Real quick, one example on each before we wrap up this video. Material, for example, like I said, paint. We just talked about paint. Paint is material. It's condition, it's wet, and it's flammable. Okay, if you leave it open, the fumes of the paint, the fumes of the thinner, they're going to come up and maybe fill up this room that I am in. And if somebody comes in and decides to smoke, this is an unsafe act if somebody smokes in a place where there are flammables. But if the person using the paint left it like that, uncovered, and the fumes are filling up the room, this is an unsafe act. But if this person left and the fumes still here, another one comes and decides to smoke, this room is in an unsafe condition and they smoked, boom, or a fire happened. Now, equipment, we can talk about anything. We can talk from a needle to a big crane or a big jackhammer. Anything you use for this job and you need it for another job and another job and another after that, this is equipment. For example, if a hammer, a sledgehammer I'm using, if the hammer itself is all frayed and the handle is in a bad shape, this is an unsafe condition of the hammer itself. It's in an unsafe condition. But if I choose to use it, if I decide to use it, this is an unsafe act. The hammer itself is in an unsafe condition. If I decide to use it, it's an unsafe act. Now, we have exposed wires coming out of a switch panel. Okay? This is an unsafe condition. But if I go and touch them while the electricity is running and I'm not wearing any electrical gloves to protect my hand, if I touch it by on purpose, then this is an unsafe act. Again, it's hazardous in itself, unsafe condition. If I decide to touch it, it's an unsafe act. Environment, for example, if the ground is slippery, and it's always going to be slippery. Why? Because this is the environment of this workplace. This workplace is always going to be slippery. No matter what we do, no matter what happens, it's always going to be slippery. Okay, in this case, we cannot eliminate it, we cannot substitute it, we cannot control engineering means. We have admin controls in place, but now we come to PPE. We need to have friction resistant, or safety shoes that have too much friction. We need to have that while we are working and while we are walking in that environment. Why? Because the environment itself is slippery. If I come in there, the slippery environment, this is an unsafe condition. But if I choose to go there wearing normal shoes or normal slippers, then this is an unsafe act. Again, real quick, unsafe conditions involve material, equipment, and environment, and unsafe acts always involve people and their decisions. Okay? Hopefully this video was short and to the point, and hopefully you got some good information out of it. Until the next video, I hope you stay safe. Thank you for watching.